The events industry is turning to virtual events to face the crisis generated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the massive cancellation of physical events. EventsCase wanted to support the industry by doing what it does best, putting technology at the forefront. You can now run virtual or hybrid events in minutes. There are no delays and no technical complications as we offer top-notch customer support along the way. With the new Smart TV interface in EventsCase's agenda module for both the web and the event app, event participants can access different virtual sessions with ease. As the event organizer, you simply need to add the link of your favorite streaming or video conference supplier within each session. Adding a link enables a play button for each session. Interaction amongst online attendees is also possible since the EventsCase platform supports Q&A, chat, and surveys in real time. Albeit from a distance, networking is still fully supported within EventsCase through the new video link function in our one-to-one meeting scheduler, as well as through private messages, news feeds, and forums. EventsCase is an easy-to-use, global, modular, multi-language, and secure event management software. Discover all of our products at www.eventscase.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to the 7th episode of the Event Tech Talk Show. Before we get started, two important pieces of information. First of all, registration for Event Tech Live US and Canada is now open and you can register at eventtechlive.com or by actually scanning this handy QR code if I get the right corner in the top right corner, and that'll take you straight to the registration page. Secondly, entries for this year's Event Technology Awards are also open, and information about the categories is available at eventtechnologyawards.co.uk. If you missed episode 6, which was actually recorded late last week, me and Katie Mohan of 5283 recently discussed the LinkedIn report that suggests that by 45% of all B2B events would be virtual, which is quite a polarizing kind of comment, and that's quite a lot of events. So go and check that out. We dissect that report. We question it in some areas, and we agree and disagree with it in some areas. So go and check that out. It's available on YouTube and also all the major podcasting networks like Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. And in fact, we've actually set a URL up for it, so you can just go to eventtechtalks.com. So on today's episode, my guest is Sam Allen, professional MC, virtual event host, moderator, and meeting designer. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me. I feel totally weird being on this side of the screen rather than on your side of the screen.
Yeah, this is your job, right? So like we can switch. You can interview me.
Hashtag out of my comfort zone right now. Yeah, sorry if I ask Adam more questions than you guys ask me.
Sam, in this episode, we're going to be talking, I guess, and touching upon the importance of actually having somebody professionally in place to help manage, moderate, and host your event. But this wasn't where you started out in the events industry, right? Like, this is not something you've done you've done it kind of as part of your event industry kind of history, career, I guess. But for anybody that's watching, can you give people a little overview of kind of how you got started and what brought you to where you are today?
I think that we probably have done some stuff in the murky, distant past. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's really exciting to be here. And as I said, a bit out of my comfort zone, but that's a good thing, right? So I have been in the event industry for at least 2001, so 20 years now. I started off actually organizing events. I was an event planner over in Asia. And then people will know me. I would imagine a lot of people who are joining us today will know me from my sales positions in beautiful venues like the Barbican, Twickenham Stadium, and then later on in my career at the SECC. I was quite involved in MPI as one of the associations, the industry associations. So was a president of the UK and Ireland chapter for a couple of years. So I did a lot of these hosting of roundtable debates and panel discussions in the industry, having no idea this was a career. I knew speakers did a bit of, the intro stuff, but didn't actually know that this was a profession. In 2015, I actually did they called it a master's in moderation. So I actually took on a training course to learn how to become a moderator. Still not really thinking it was a thing. I went off and set up a business consultancy. Some people remember Sequoia Partnership, Sequoia Venue Solutions. And life changes, difficult things happen. And the path was basically pointing me and pushing me towards becoming an MC. I was asked by a big pharmaceutical company to come and host an event in Basel in 2019. And I said, what's the event on? And they said, small cell lung cancer. I said, well, I know nothing about that, so therefore I cannot moderate this. They said, Sam, you know about how to get people engaged and get the best out of content. I said, yeah, but I do that in the event industry. I can't possibly do it. So they kept on pushing, and then they said they'd pay me. That was a sway. That was a sway at that point. I have never been more nervous in my life, because I really had that imposter syndrome. What was this as a job? Lots of things went wrong. A lot of things went right. They've become a regular client, and I got the biggest buzz out of any job I've ever done. So yeah, back end of 2019, set up samallen.com, and the rest is history, they say.
Congratulations. It's only taken you that long to go from doing something for free to making money from it. No, interestingly, I think on that point, because many people do this, many people host, many people moderate, some it gets thrust upon them, others maybe put themselves forward, probably like me and you, we want to help out, we want to get involved, what can I do? And you probably do it for your own industry because you're comfortable, right? You're comfortable with any of the topics that come up. But what was your reasoning back before all of that in past and previous kind of roles for hosting and moderating events?
I think there was a passion of getting the best out of an event for participants. People will know me. I've been harping on about this for years. I am a meeting designer. I have taken, my CED, yet to just get my little rubber stamp, but I took that. I also last year, 20th of April last year, I did my online event design course. So I'm a meeting design geek. Participation engagement, when we're spending this much money and this much time, and not just us as organizers, but us in terms of participants, we really need to make sure that we're getting the best out of all the people that we're working with. And yes, we see various people deciding to take the role on as a host, but we are taking that away from the roles and the responsibilities that they have, for instance, and the objectives it's going to have. Doing this job and having seen this side of the challenges in it, and before Sam Allen and Associates was born, I think for me that real role of that host is to be able to connect the content with the participant in the most effective way.
Yeah, it's really interesting you make that point, and that's been my experience, that you go to many events and probably 9 times out of 10 the wrong person is on stage hosting and moderating. They might be the CEO, they might be the sales director. They're probably somebody that's got an element of confidence within that organization or that network of people.
Yeah.
And they're encouraged or coerced into taking that role because they have some level of confidence rather than it being their job. But that ultimately takes them away from what they were probably there at the event to do in the first place, which is maybe network with customers or deal with staff or do other elements of things. Do you think that's a trap that many kind of corporate and stuff, they just go, that's the person in charge, so we're going to put them on stage and that's got to be their job?
I think there's a couple of things. I'm not going to say to our friends and our colleagues watching today, you must hire a host like Sam Allen or any of the team that we've got. But you've got to look at what actually that role is of the host. Now, I think there can often be, and I've had experience of this, where stakeholders within the organization, senior leaders, are a little bit worried that it's, the host is going to be the person that is the front, well, you're not our organization. You're not the face of the organization. No, I am, or a host will be. That's the job, the preparation and planning that we do. We become part of your family, part of your organization. But our job is to make those leaders, those senior, those important stakeholders in your conference look and feel comfortable and be able to do the best job that they are, which is the forward-facing piece. So, a good way to describe it is if we go back, and I know we'll probably talk about broadcasting, but think about TV. Yeah. Graham Norton doesn't introduce himself. He has someone, so you don't know who that is. You hear the voice of God or whatever it might be, or Anton Deck. We all know here in the UK. I know we've got a lot of different people. Google it if you're not from the UK. You can Google Anton Deck. I use them a lot in terms of broadcasting. we as hosts, and absolutely by choosing the right host, are there to make the best of your leaders, certainly not take the shine away. We always say the best job that we can do is if somebody actually doesn't even know our name. My job is so that it's so seamless in an in-person event for the government. Actually, I had somebody, the lady in the red jacket knows everything. That's right, but that's all you need to know is the lady in the red jacket or the lady with the pink lipstick, and she knows how to put all this together. So our role is to help elevate and make sure that your people shine, and that's our reason for being.
There we go. You mentioned one thing that is an industry term, and I just want to make sure that we cover off those industry terms for anybody that's watching this that might not be.
Did I use an acronym? Did I say something?
No.
Oh, good.
No, not at all. But it was one of those things that the only voice of God that I ever knew about was that little voice in the back of my head that made me have the fear of God. Voice of God. Let's just explain for anybody that comes across this that doesn't know what that actually means. Could you explain what a voice of God is?
And I was with those people when I went to that first pharmaceutical conference. They said, "Are we okay if we do some voice of God with you?" And I thought we were at a pharmaceutical conference, not a religious gathering. So, it was very easy. The voice of God is the voice you hear when you hear, "Ladies and gentlemen, you have 2 minutes. Please find your seats. Please take your seats. We will be starting the show in 60 seconds." And you hear that voice. And I'm not sure whether it's, there's any other term other than voice of God. I'm sure there is. I'm sure people can tell us in the chat, but that's what a voice of God is. And again, if you've got a good host, we can do all of that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. James Dixon, who works with us on the Event Technology Awards and all that kind of stuff, he's stood behind stage. And that's really important that you have that person in place because they're kind of taking coordination from maybe show callers, other people. Maybe there's a delay on something. Maybe the AV team needs something. And having somebody in place like you or James is really important to relay that information in real time to the audience and make those changes.
I think what you've just said as well about the show caller, the AV team, you've just hit the nail on the head in terms of why you need someone who does this day in, day out, because there are a huge number of moving parts in the role of a big or a small conference. So, if you're going to throw your MD who's experienced it leading your business, and you start saying, right, you need to be listening to the show caller in your ear. You've got AV doing this. And this is in person. And I know we're talking more on the virtual world, which is actually much, much more complex. But even in person, when people say, well, it's okay, you can hold the mic. It's not just about holding the mic. You're taking direction. You're hearing the show. You're not seeing what's happening next. You want to be telling people what's happening next. Keep the energy going. Understand what's happening when there's a speaker not arriving on stage or hasn't been mic'd up, whatever it might be. So it is remembering that all those stakeholders, nicely said.
Yeah, it's a pure multitasker's role, isn't it, really? Like, you've got to remember so much and be able to absorb so much information in the moment and kind of piece that together in the puzzle of, right, this is how this all fits together now. And most people just throw that information at a host. They don't kind of relay, this is how we'd like. They just go, this needs to be done. Figure it out with the rest of the stuff. That's really hard unless you have that experience in that professional environment to be able to do that. It can only come through experience, right? Well, that's at least my impression of it. Before we go on to my next question, and we will dig really into virtual, because I think there's some major differences between emceeing and hosting virtually and in person. We have somebody here, and I wonder if you agree with this. So the dopamine hit is pretty motivating too, right? I think that's jfloyd.co.
Hey, Joe. I am so pleased that you're here. I know Joe through a virtual, we're virtual buddies from connecting at a conference last year. And actually, now he was a participant and we've been connected, and I hope I can call you a buddy, Joe. The dopamine hit is incredible. The low also. So if you are looking to join this wonderful profession and become an MC, you do get the highs, but I tell you what, and I think Joe will also agree, you get the lows. Always make sure you've booked some time. I mean, I know how important, Adam, you and your organization are talking about event well-being and mental health. When you have given this huge physical as well as mental 3 days, 2 days, 4 hours, or whatever it might be, it's really intense. And yes, that high is there, and that's been a bit tough That's a downside of virtual when you're on your own. If you're in a studio, it's great because that's the sort of, the next normal. But on your own, having that dopamine high, you've got to go and high five the cat or the dog. But also, you got to make a bit of space to give yourself that little that come down. I cry after every conference.
Oh, I'm gonna tell you that from a physical event, the train ride home for me after Event Tech Live is the hardest train ride ever, and it's not because anything went wrong. It's just you're emotionally and physically exhausted, and then you're on your own. Well, I am anyway. Yeah. So that it's important that we talk about that stuff because it's that many people do have that, especially if they're in the event. They have that big drop off, don't they? They have that big crash because you're just running on adrenaline.
And that's that whole thing virtually is, how can we as organizers, we're all there, and it's all of those stakeholders, whether it's your production team, they may or may not be together, the event organizer, the show caller, your host. What do you do as a bringing everybody together? A couple of times with conferences I've hosted, we've sort of ended the event, and I mean, literally, that's it. There's not been a sort of virtual high five or just, how did that go? And, as Joe alluded to, we are dopamine addicts. So we kind of need to have something to bring us down. But yeah, make sure, I think it's a super mentally intense job. And especially for something like Event Tech Live as well, when you've been in this team, and for hosts who do this, it's like the A team, if everyone remembers, or you may all be too young. Joe definitely remembers the A-team. Adam remembers the A-team. But you sort of come in, you join a team. It's super intense to deliver. That's what we all do, events, and that's why we do events. And then, of course, we leave as the host. We leave the team, and then we're on to the next team. And that's, it's lovely. That's why we do it. But it's a big, emotional roller coaster.
So let's talk a little bit about virtual events then, because the last 12 to 18 months, I forget now how long we've been doing this. The explosion of virtual events has obviously, there's just been an explosion. And now everybody's hosting a virtual event, right? So do you think it's more important that an organizer of an event brings somebody in to host those virtually? Because we've all been doing, I'm going to be quite problematic for you. I'm going to be quite controversial. Everybody's been on Zoom calls. It's like, here's the next speaker, off you go. Like, it's not that big a deal, is it, Sam? Like, anybody can do it, right?
It's what you want to call it, isn't it? I don't know. I've written a blog recently that got a little bit of traction because, when we've been delivering in-person events all through the years, I'm still saying, let's not look at these through rose-tinted glasses, guys. We weren't, as an industry, we weren't hosting, and we weren't planning great meetings. We had engagement issues. We were losing sponsors. We were losing exhibitors. The world was evolving, albeit much, much slower than the pandemic has brought us.
Yeah.
I think the frustration is immediately after the pandemic, people recognized the need to bring, an audience together, that need for human connection. And, let's not knock Zoom for what it's done for us to have these conversations about where the industry and where events should be going. But also, let's be honest, from a personal point of view, how many people on here haven't benefited, socially or professionally from Zoom? I mean, hands up if you haven't. I can't see many hands up. So
some virtual hands up, guys, in the comments if you feel like Sam.
Yeah, if you disagree. But we have to recognize there has been an evolution. There has to be further innovation. And I think that's where you define a call. You just called it a Zoom call. That's it. A Zoom call or a Zoom meeting versus an event. And when we talk, and we do a lot of coaching with speakers as part of what we do, we try and put that at the very beginning. This is not another Zoom call. This is a broadcast. This is an experience. This is something that your participants should and are paying for. So we have to treat it completely differently. We didn't, but I don't think there's an excuse 12 months later.
No, I think everybody's been figuring out that first point, but the virtual event that you put on for your organization or for your association or whoever, how the people that interact with that and the people that represent you on that are a direct reflection of you and your brand, right? So if you come to it from a professional point of view, if you come forward with somebody like yourself who's hosting and moderating, for me personally, that just elevates the quality of it. Whether you're using Zoom or not, whatever platform you're using, the event design piece is critical to how people will feel about your event walking away from it, right? Rather than somebody like me fumbling through it, kind of introducing the next person and kind of trying to get through it, you'll bring a level of, I guess, what's the word, added value to that event, right?
Yeah, it's added value. It's linking, and I love the fact that we've got somebody saying the only differentiator is a good digital host. And I already picked it up because I know I'm good at what I do, but a great speaker or a great host, and I would absolutely agree. And it's a make or break. And I say in this blog post, there's no such thing as when people say, "Well, I was digitally fatigued." I totally disagree with that. I think we're just all bored of crap digital meetings, if I'm allowed to say that. I think, we're bored of not having people design these meetings with us as participants in their brains, in their minds. We've got to sit there and spend a bit more time, understanding time zones, what our audience are doing, who those audience are, what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what they're thinking. And if you go through sort of the design process, the design methodology, it's difficult to say at 5:30 UK time. That's a process. Whereas I feel like, in the last year, we've got a lot of people saying, we've got to do something, let's do it now. Well, you can put a Zoom meeting on really quickly. So we must be able to put an online event on. Now, you wouldn't do that in practice in-person events. You wouldn't say to someone, a meeting owner, and you'd certainly push back as you, the organizer, if someone said to you, right, Adam, I want you to put together an event, a conference, a 2-day conference for 2,500 delegates, and I'd like you to do it in 3 weeks' time. And I want you to do everything from design to completion. You just wouldn't do it. You'd just say, well, that's impossible. Well, I would also argue that's impossible to do that digitally. Well, if you're going to do something well and you're going to take 2,500 delegates, of which that's a huge amount of time and a huge amount of investment that they're giving you, you've got to give it that time to plan and prepare properly.
Well, that also, I guess, nicely segues into some of that extra value, though, of bringing you in, is when somebody maybe does have that task and the event organizer title goes to many different people in an organization, right? Bringing somebody like yourself in with that level of experience and confidence can add so much value to advising on how to piece this event together, right? So if they are the designated event organizer, never done a virtual event before, let's bring Sam in and let's have her as part of the team, guiding us along the way, bouncing ideas off. What do you think about this? What do you think about? I bet you probably get 9 times out of 10 involved in the design of the actual event, right? Even though you're just the host.
Well, don't just say I'm just the host.
Sorry.
I mean, that's just hashtag rude. Adam is rude there.
We will end the broadcast there. No.
I think that's something that if we can get across today, and I can say to everybody, to you guys who are watching, I think, any good host worth their salt. I mean, I add a little bit more because I do spend a lot of time designing meetings and events with my clients. So that is another skill set that I bring sort of independently. But we host events, and we have been since, I was doing a little bit of this before pandemic, but not a huge amount, as you can appreciate. But since the pandemic, since lockdown, bar the first few weeks where, I was just watching my business die, I lost every event, like we all have experienced that dreadful time. And whilst a lot of people were saying they were taking on Ashtanga yoga and learning, every word of the Bible, I was just drinking gin and eating chocolate and feeling very sorry for myself because my world had disappeared. And I really didn't know whether this would work online. And great design makes great meetings wherever they're hosted. So I think that's something that you really need to think about. And as a host, since then, I've been pretty much doing this every week of the last 50 weeks, as are my other, associates and other moderators and hosts out there. So we've seen, trust me, we've seen the really good, we've seen the bad, and we have seen the ugly. And we can bring that experience that if you're only, organizing your first or your second event, you may, certainly with your first event, you just haven't got that experience and know-how. So, use us, take this stuff out of our brain, because we're better to be able to talk about what the risks are. And that's what we do in event management, in event organizing and planning. And we can sort of, mitigate those by the experience that we've had with, whether it be, technology issues, platform, content, speakers, whatever it might be. So yes, I would say, why wouldn't you? I mean, if you're bringing a host on, you might as well bring them on as early as you can. That will also help us in terms of really getting under the skin of your event objectives, meeting and understanding your stakeholders. And I think if any of my clients are online with us, they'll vouch for that. That will also make a better experience. We don't have the benefit of tons of researchers like Graham Norton or Jay Leno would have. They collate all this information that he gets, or whoever it might be. So we're quite happy to spend that time with our organization to make sure that we can help deliver spectacular end results.
So point one, get your professional MC and host in early, one of the first things that you book as part of the event, and that's just going to make the whole process and experience much better. When
you book, this as an event organizer, an MC is part of the production team. I work and we work really closely with the production, the prod squad, as Zoe Paul calls them, the prod squad. We're the mouthpiece, the front of that team. So the sooner we work with your production team, whether that's in-house or whether that's an external partner, the better the event will be, because we're all working in tandem. The event production company will be bringing in their expertise, and we sit like hand in glove. Yeah,
there's some other key things I know we discussed prior to kind of running this live podcast.
We discussed or we ranted about?
Yeah, probably the latter, to be honest with you. But I think there's some key things that people don't think about when it comes to a role like yours. And I want to kind of fire some questions at you, because I know you've got some answers, some help, some tips, and if nothing else, to show the value of having somebody like yourself in place as part of that virtual event. What does a host do if they lose a speaker? Because that happens, right, virtually all the time. Someone's camera goes off, their mic doesn't. You see them fumbling about, going, I think the internet's still a bit dodgy. What would you do in that situation, or what advice can you offer to others that might not be given a budget to get a host, but literally desperately need to know this stuff?
Well, first of all, this all comes back to planning. Preparation and time to do it. Test again with your speakers. Everything that we can tick off and mitigate before we're online is critical. And that really does mean getting a bit more pushy with these speakers. The amount of, if I had, £10 or €10 or $10 for every time we've tested a speaker and then we've got them for live and they're in a different place. Yeah. We need to be testing them exactly the same time as they're broadcasting, because as we know, as much as we ask people, just go buy yourself an Ethernet cable, or just, send them out, somebody sponsor them. We know that our speakers may not have that connection, and there may be connectivity is our biggest challenge, as we all know. So I think that, try and do as much of that as we can before. I think it's also good to bring the host in terms of that point, or at some point before, and not saying having a full rehearsal with your speakers, but again, I'm looking at the camera, you're looking at the camera. We're well versed and very comfortable about doing that. Most people see this machine as a laptop. Yep. So we'll be doing this and we'll be talking like that. And I understand that, but we can change that. We can elevate the experience. Make people stand up, give them that energy. So I think that's really important. I think you've got to be in sync with your organizer and your production team about how and what you're going to do if that happens. Now, if you've got a panel, it's fine. But again, you want to have this pre-briefing and explain to the panelists. It's communicating with all the stakeholders, with your speakers, and saying, right, if you come off, if we lose you, this is the steps we're going to take. As a host, I would come on at the call of production, because quite often, and you'll probably know this from some of the events you've been on, it's a very, very quick, we lose them, we can get them back on. We have to make that decision before whether you want the host to come on. We've had situations in the past where we've had to pull out a speaker just because the connectivity has just been pretty poor. So, we might be having a two-way conversation like this and then, push your host back in. But my recommendation is to have that contingency plan for each sector of your event. What do we do in this scenario? You may have not the need of the host. You may have a moderator that's there, or somebody else that might come in as a backup, as a second, so to speak, but it's just a consideration to have. As a host, we'll always be there. I won't be off, it's the communication. If I need to go grab a drink and leave the studio, then I'll do that when it's appropriate, but then you can't cover all bases. We had a pre-record. So same thing about losing a speaker. We had a pre-record. It's the safest way of doing this. And as a moderator, as a host, once someone's pressed play on the video, I can sit and just relax and eat chocolate or whatever it might be, my snack or my treats. And we lost the video. It doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen very often, but we just lost the video. And then suddenly I've got a message on WhatsApp saying, you're on in 10. And so you just have to be prepared. And you can't do that without having the experience. You'd never know that I'd have to jump in and start talking about plasma. Because that's what you do, and you've got the skills as a professional host to be that filler, to understand, at the same time being completely interested in the audience and whatever's going on screen, but at the same time seeing the WhatsApp messages if it's that sort of production, or having somebody in your ear saying, Sam, we can't call them back, so this is what we're going to do. And that only comes from from experience. It's the same as you may enjoy flying, but you can't fly the plane. It's the same sort of thing.
There's so many important points there. I think I can honestly see events going, especially ones that have virtual and hybrid elements, this now being part of, we've discussed it internally. Should we ask certain technical questions as part of the process of selecting a speaker? Do you have a hardwired internet connection? Do you have any form of lighting? Do you have a microphone? Because all of those now go into not only knowing that there's some level of experience there in that person actually delivering a session in this way, because not everybody has, but also some knowledge in they've probably experienced a few things going wrong themselves, and they see the value of upping the quality, which ultimately helps you. There's nothing worse, is there, than having a virtual event where somebody looks like a shadow and it looks like they're in the toilet and there's echo and there's all these kinds of things. Let's be honest, we're all working from home, and I've got a little son in the background. I'm sure he's going to kick off at some point, and we'll probably all hear that. But we can all accept that. I think what I can't accept at this moment in time is somebody coming. It would be like almost a speaker coming in board shorts and a vest to a professional conference and accepting that's just, that's a given. It's fine because I'm here to speak. Matt Coyne, if you're watching this, by the way, that was you I'm talking about. And I think there's some other interesting things that you said there as well about like what happens in the moment. Like it surprises me how many event organizers still don't have a technical issues holding slide in the deck.
Yeah, it's a just extremely simple. Most of the production companies I've worked with, all of them have been awesome. So I'm going to say that if they're joining us now. But again, that's where you cover off as part of the process. You do this again. This is just different. We've got to keep on remembering this is just a different venue. What would we do, and how do we do it in person? And again, that whole thing, I know that we discussed standing versus perching. I'm perching at the moment, as you know. It's been a bit of a busy day. But if we just do one thing, please, can everybody get their speakers to stand? What happened? If we did that, we would elevate this digital experience exponentially. Just that one thing. We don't, apart from on a panel, when we have people on stage sitting down, and I still quite like them perched. I think it's more, physically energetic, which is always good for delivering content. But, when have you seen unless you're physically enabled or unless it's part of a show, how often do you see a keynote sitting down in a t-shirt or shorts, as you said, and it beggars belief that we're still a year on accepting that. And I think as event industry professionals, I think we know better. We do. We've been doing this. We've been planning this. And it's also very easy if people are broadcasting at home and they come online before the session, you can see what they're wearing. And I have had experience where our wonderful event manager has told them to go and get changed because, this is an event. We wouldn't, again, you wouldn't be faceless, you wouldn't be not well lit at a conference. But it's a case of what, as you said, what's that checklist? And what are your boundaries? And what do you do to respect those participants who are paying to see this content?
Yeah, and like you said, even if they don't have it, then it's your responsibility as an organizer to send this kit out. Amazon has it dirt cheap. You don't even have to get it delivered to your place. You can just get it delivered direct to the speaker. There are great professional industry companies that support this and send speaker packs out on return.
Yeah.
They can even sustainably be sent from one speaker to the next speaker without having to come back internally all the time. So there is no excuse now with how good the infrastructure and how cheap this equipment is, both direct or through a supplier, that can be handled, that you should be able to get 90% of your speakers up there with good quality lighting and audio and stuff.
And stick it, you know what, just stick this in the budget. You're not paying for speaker accommodation. And I'm a real firm believer, and I know we'll talk about the future about, bringing awesome content without having to fly someone, 3/4 of the way around the world for one day. Put this into the budget because it's a flipping load cheaper than a business class ticket from, London to Sydney. Sending, and again, I know we've got issues at the moment with the B word now, not the C word, with Brexit. But again, with the time, what does that look like? But as you said, I spoke to a colleague today about this. It costs less than €20, £20, $20 for an Ethernet cable. You can buy a ring light, super cheap, and it can be really, I wouldn't go to the super cheap, but you can get one and it's decent. And I think that, whatever content you're delivering, even if it is a meeting as opposed to an event, shouldn't you be able to be in the best position so that people can see you and they can hear you? And that's really what we want from our content, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Rachel here, she's, interestingly, swap card run an event, VIP, sent her impressive tip for a 30-minute presentation. I watched that content. It looked fantastic. So, people are doing it. Sam, out of interest, what do you use as your, let's talk tech, let's talk some kit. What do you use to? Well,
annoyingly, I don't have my play camera on because I'm setting up for an event in here. Otherwise I'd take you on a tour of this very, very minimal studio space that I have. So I have an HD camera, and again, you don't need to spend huge amounts of money, because we've got to remember, even though I'm in an office studio, so this is purpose-built for what I do, this isn't a treated studio. This isn't production with an MCR. We don't have that here. So you can only be as good as the space you are. I've filled it with furniture to try and make sure that the sound is absorbed, so it feels a bit more inclusive. Yep. So I have a great microphone, a Blue Yeti microphone. I think for everything I do, if you can't see me, it's really irrelevant, but you need to hear me, and I need to be very clear. I work with global audiences. I need to give you housekeeping. I need to tell you and support you with how you can get the best out of a platform, how you can engage. So I think sound is probably for someone in my role really super important. So a really good microphone. I have AirPods so that I can have people talking to me in my ears. And it also completely zones out from any other noise that I've got. So I'm really just focused in on all the content here. I have some professional lighting and a green screen for any conferences that use them. And it's actually set up just, you can't see it. And obviously the window to the beach.
Something interesting. I need to sort this out because I've had like a white cupboard for the last year. I'm slowly getting there. Trying to decide what to have. Might have some of my art and stuff going in the background. But you're right. Not to anybody watching. I'm sure people watching this are probably in it and already have some kind of this equipment. But you can get set up for very cost effectively, can't you? And you'd be surprised how. I think people are surprised how much little money you actually need to be in to get such a big gain. It's actually when you start going up from, I don't know, let's say I've got here a Logitech C920, 1080p camera, fantastic, maybe a couple $100. When you start jumping up to, let's say, a Sony or a Canon or something like that, markedly different, but you have to invest huge amounts more money to get diminishing returns. I feel sometimes you can, the higher the spec that you go, it gets just marginally better. And in this environment, it probably doesn't translate. It's not.
No, you need to then shift into, into a studio. You need to go where there's a multi-control room, where there's, really, reliable fiber, where the lighting, where the room is treated for sound, studio stroke venue. I think, for speakers, if you're okay with speakers being at home and that's the situation they're in, then reliable connectivity. And, if I could, again, I'd be a rich lady if I bet on this, when people say, well, I've got really high speed Wi-Fi. Great. That is really great. But without that Ethernet cable, it can be inconsistent depending on the time of day. It's just so simple. And I really say, get people to stand, get them connected to the Wi-Fi and get them able to hear. So whether that, I know people think the headsets are a bit, gamey. They sound good. They really do. They work. So if you're not going to be spending the cash on a Blue Yeti for every single one of your speakers, just make sure that we can hear them. I think that's probably, the best tip we can say around those things.
Unless Blue Yeti is watching and listening, and then all sponsorship enquiries, hello@eventtechlive.com. Interesting question here from Rachel, because green screens are a bit controversial. Some people love them, other people detest them. What's your take?
So I would really like everybody to throw out so I can see the debate and discussion, because I'm not seeing this. So Rachel, I think that's a brilliant question. And, one of the things that you really need to understand is what your platform is, because I have had an experience where a speaker has assumed he can have a Zoom virtual background. We've gone to record. We were pre-recording, but we were still recording his session. And he only learned then that we couldn't use a green screen with the technology we were using. And it was awkward because there was underwear on a door frame and he was dressed to here. And it was just a moment that no one wants to have with someone you don't know that you're just about to do a 45-minute interview with. So I think you need to be really transparent on that. Rachel, green screen. I'm using a green screen. You've got to have a really good lighting. You need to be lighting not just yourself, you need to be lighting your background. So again, to make this really effective, white virtual backgrounds are bad. Please don't use them, especially if you've got blonde hosts, because then we just disappear no matter what we put behind us and behind our cameras. Darker colors work quite well if you're going to use them, but then you've got to have the consistency. I've seen it and it's a horror show for me from a participant point of view, where we have one person that actually has all the kit and looks great and the branding is there. Then somebody else has got a green screen of, whatever it might be behind them. I'm just a fan of keeping just a clean white background. It doesn't have to be the bookshelf or the beach scene. I think you have to have the consistency and you need to test that. And I've yet to see, an entirely consistent usage of green screen, because people don't have, virtual backgrounds, because people don't have all the necessary stuff to make it work. They were fun. I mean, let's be honest, there's nothing nicer. I almost did that today and just said, I'm in the pub, because we can almost get into the pub. But I think that in terms of, the level of professionalism that we should be reaching for our events, I think that's a question we should all ask ourselves. Is that professional? Is that good enough?
Yeah. My own opinion, and I have a green screen, lighting is super, super key, because if you don't have it well lit, then that's when you get the edges, the cutouts, the graininess, the pass through and stuff. Fun top tip: if you are using a green screen and you are sat down on a chair, put a light on the back of your chair, because that will actually get rid of the shadow of the chair and that makes it work better. My only opinion on green screens in a studio environment where it's a controlled environment and there's loads of lighting and it's a huge green screen and you want to do something dramatic with that, then that's fine.
That's a brilliant way, because that's big production and you can do some great stuff on that. That's, but then also please make sure that your speakers and nobody's wearing green.
Yeah, true. Like me today, that wouldn't work.
That would be, and people need to remember that whole thing around if you're using stuff. And I can remember this very early days. I'm really happy to post some very dodgy pictures of my setup at the very beginning, but we were sort of trying to teleport awards, and it was a really fun idea. But then somebody had a green screen, a virtual background without the green screen. So then you hold it up and it disappears. So be really conscious about what you're doing and testing again. Test that one out.
I think what I saw most people do them for is kind of this stuff that we have down here, like branding opportunities, right? You can do that in so many other ways now. Overlays, backgrounds, and again, if you've got an AV company, they should know all of this. They should be able to say, here's our templates, work with us, and you can get all of those. We've got
the worst thing you can have as a speaker. Sorry, I'll shut up about the virtual. Rachel, you've got me on a blooming roll about this. The worst thing is if it's a bad virtual background or it's a bad background of any type, it's distraction. And that's a real disappointment, because we are paying to listen to, or we're showing up to listen and have this content, and you don't want anything distracting you.
Talking about people shutting up, that brings me on to my next question. How do you gently stop somebody that won't stop speaking? Because this is virtual events even more so have to run to schedules, right? Don't they? And it can be a really hard, it could be excellent content. It might, the organizer might desperately not want to stop that person or interrupt them, or maybe they are the keynote. But in a professional environment, we still need to keep things rocking and rolling, don't we? So what's your advice there?
Well, my first question is to everybody, do we? Because I feel that we are trying to constrict ourselves to time in an environment where, if we've done this with the right communication, if the content is good, I'm sick of hearing incredible content and getting 10 minutes of it. Is anyone else with me? We've got a 10-minute keynote. Why? It's about the design. It's about how that keynote is interacting with your audience. And, we can all sit there, binge watching 3, 4, 5 hours of TV. We're consuming that. Something's drawing us to it. Now, how do we relay that and bring that into our design? I, for one, if I'm engaged, I want to hear, I want to learn more. And there's nothing more frustrating. And I'll tell you this from a participant feedback point of view. I've seen that time and time again. There wasn't enough time. Or we have a keynote and we have 3 minutes for questions. It's like you've got an audience of 200 people. We're back to what we were doing before. We can ask one question, and we've got some great tools with upvoting, but we're not constrained by venues closing us down at 6 p.m. because we're not paying the overnight fee or whatever it might be. We can design these. We have the other considerations of things like time zoning, yada, yada, yada. But, do we need to have that? That's my one point. Number two, when you're working with great production companies, as we keep saying, it's all about bringing the right partners to this. And there's some really great software that can actually help speakers. I know, for one, I get super excited when I'm, delivering the tiny little links that I'm doing. But, again, with experience, I can do them very, very quickly, because I'm saying different content, but the same things really for each sort of conference in terms of links. I think it's really hard for a speaker when you're looking here to try and see where everything's going. So I think you need to be really, really clear before the speaker starts. And I think you need to have that general understanding that if we go over, we've got to do this. And then virtually, bring me on. I think it's sort of been that thing that a speaker will know. And it's the same thing. And I've had to do this on stage, and it was the most horrific thing. I literally just had to grab a professor off the stage. It was, I'm tormented by this still, because he'd seen all the cues, he'd acknowledged all the cues, but he carried on talking. And I then stood up onto the stage, and that's a really good tip for anyone doing this in person, so that your presence is there. Most people then sort of go, oh gosh, there she is, I better stop. He didn't. So I just had to go on clapping and just stopping him talking. And, you need someone with a massive, great, big, annoying smile like this. And it was just a horrible experience, but I got him off. It's actually easier when you can push a host on, because you're talking, and the second that you can see that change, you don't need to say anything. You just bring me on, and then they'll, yes. And then if they don't at that point, I can then interrupt. That's my job, and again, I can do that because you're paying me to do that. That's very difficult for, if it's one of your big donors or big, sponsors, and then you as the MD have got to go, can you shut up, Bob?
Yep.
I can do that. I don't mind shutting Bob up.
All those award acceptance speeches, those are the ones that you've got to watch. Got to watch because they thank the dog, the nan, their uncle, their aunties, and everybody.
Do a pre-record on those, or don't do that. I mean, the great thing is you can change it up in the design for virtual awards, and also build that in. If you know, and you've got under the core of that. The other thing is you can have that conversation. If there's a ton of engagement about that content, why stop it?
Yeah.
Bring on your host. You can say, let's have a, whatever it might be, a click of a hands up, or say yes in the chat. Do you want us to carry this on? You must respect the audience and what they're doing. But quite often, that's been an experience of ours that, we'll go back to the audience and say, do you want to carry this on extra 5 minutes or whatever it might be? So I would be more fluid about our boundaries of time, but don't be afraid of pushing your host on.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to see as well, and I think this is one of maybe the things we will see over time, is people just coming out of the shackles of the presentation Q&A. I think some of the most interesting sessions are literally just Q&A sessions. Let's bring that keynote on, because to be fair, everybody just wants to dig into their mind anyway. They want to go, oh, you said this in your last event, or there was this article about you, or what do you think said this on stem cell research? That's quite jarring for some presenters, because they need that crutch of, well, this is my presentation, this is what I speak about, and having to answer questions in the moment, in the fray, is a skill in itself. But they're so interesting when you actually have a good Q&A session.
But if you've got a professional who knows how to interview, and again, I was trained in this, we can bring the best out of, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to resist this change, who've been doing it, the way they've been doing it for a really long time. And so, we can't expect everybody to suddenly go, yeah, let's do my 45 minutes, this conversation and inputs. And whilst we'd love them to, that's, we're already asking them to deliver in a really strange environment. They've got no audience behind them, puppy steps, Adam, as much as we are, things that we can do is, have the faith in a professional interviewer that can pull out the best in those people, give them the time to work with that speaker, with that content. Another thing that I don't know if you've seen works quite well is having sort of, a meet the speaker session after, so that they're not feeling like they're performing, and you can get into a face-to-face room and have a round table and ask those questions. So there's a variety of little ways of doing it, but it does rely on, your speaker that you're working with and how comfortable they are.
Yeah, very true. I'm conscious of time. I've just spoken about time, funnily enough.
Good grief. Yeah, look at the time.
What is, as a host, what are some of the things that you're really looking forward to seeing out of virtual events? Because I think there is, I know by quite a lot of the industry, there is some resistance to carrying on virtual post-pandemic. There's a desire by everybody, me included, to get back to physical. But interestingly, there's a recent LinkedIn article that said that 45% of all future B2B events will be virtual. So there is an explosion coming of virtual events, according to their research. What's some of the things that excites you? Because I know you're passionate about sustainability, about well-being, which also comes into like staying away from home, traveling, all that kind of stuff. But what's some of the things that you really looking forward to as part of the virtual event scene?
So sustainability, inclusivity, and diversity. If I just pick 3 really important factors, I'm in the same, I am seriously needing to hug people. People who know me know I'm a hugger. You know me, I'm a hugger. I want to do that. I want that physical experience. I want to be with the team. It's like we're talking about Joe saying that dopamine hit, high-fiving myself at the end of a conference is pretty depressing, right? And now the pubs are open. At least I can go and sit outside a pub. But, we cannot take away the fact that we have a climate crisis. We know this, and event organizers, this is a tough job, and we are really going to start going, we think the pandemic has caused some innovation. Real innovation starts now. We are going to have travel restrictions due to sustainability, and we should. But that leads to inclusivity and diversity. So those that can do it sustainably, that you're managing that experience, and that delivers on your carbon targets. That's great. But we're opening up this whole new world that, first of all, we're bringing people to our events who maybe have never been before, couldn't come before for a whole plethora of reasons. So we are suddenly turning all our organizations into hugely more inclusive organizations. We're spreading our message, whether that's increasing membership, increasing sales, whatever it might be, to a much, much wider audience. We can hold that legacy. We can keep that stuff. We don't have to have people arriving today at 5 to 6 or 5 to 10 or whatever it might be. They can come back. They can consume this stuff. We didn't do video on demand, content on demand. So really exciting there. And I suppose for me, my passion is diversity. We can really draw on the virtual world. We may not be able to get those speakers because we can't fly them, we can't afford to, we shouldn't be, whatever it might be. We open up for our participants to become more diverse, our content to become more rich and diverse. I think the opportunity is there. How we do it and how we deliver it this year is going to be the trial and test. And I'm having some fun with clients right now about that. And I look forward to us doing this again in 6-9 months time, when we can sort of communicate some war stories and some great successes. But I think, please, yes, let's get back into meeting in person. We can do, people are always saying about networking, what we're missing is socializing. It's not networking. We can network online. We can do that. We've been doing this, LinkedIn, Tinder, shall we carry on? Facebook, we've been networking online. What we don't do is socializing well, because, we're human people. We want to touch, we want to taste and feel. So yeah, I say it's an exciting time, but keep looking at how we can evolve the virtual with the in-person.
I think that's such a key word, evolve, evolution of events, right? If you look back at the original exhibition and trade show, they don't look too dissimilar to what we had today. The industry has arguably gone through its biggest transformation in its history over the last 12 months. And I think as an industry, we should embrace that change and look at the tools and the technology and the formats that we can use to bring more people to our events, more investment to events. Because the more virtual events that happen, generally the more physical events will happen, the more our industry will boom, the more talent it'll attract. It'll just make everybody's business, jobs, livelihood a lot better. And I think in the sphere of marketing, events have been kind of left out on the left field a little bit. And I think now with virtual, funnily enough, they're being brought into that digital kind of marketing sphere of, this might make sense for us in terms of, yeah, absolutely. I have one final question for you, Sam.
Okay.
This is the one thing I'm going to introduce now for all my speakers.
Okay.
So everybody listening today, I do apologise for my little son in the background, but
don't apologise. It's nearly bath time here in the UK.
I'm gonna hit him where it doesn't show, so it's fine. Not real, not serious. Everybody's got a bucket list, I believe.
Okay.
What's on your bucket list for this year? And it can literally be going to the pub, to be fair, if you want. But what's on your bucket list? Is there anything that you share with the audience?
Oh, gosh, that's a really, really good question. Bucket list of 2021. Well, I suppose very first thing is to hug my family harder than you can possibly imagine. I said offline, I sadly lost my dad in January. I don't get to do that now. But everyone else, look out, because I'm coming at you for a hug. I hope to buy a house this year and really evolve. And my last bucket list is I really, really just want to go and be able to enjoy life with family, friends, laugh, cry, do all of those things. But yeah, it's a bit sad of a bucket list, really. But yeah, the house is something, you change your attitude in lockdown. I'm sure all of us have had different sort of life experiences. And certainly for me, one of the things I like about this is that, I've had a real sense of the value of home. And as much as I love traveling, and I'm sure we'll be doing lots of it, I value home a lot more now, and spending time with my family and friends. So having a home, having a base will be my bucket list this year.
I think they're perfect bucket list things, considering everything. It shows where real value is, right? So, Sam, thank you for sharing with me and my audience and whoever's watching your top tips for, emceeing and having a host event. I think they're really, really important. I think something that every organizer and organization should consider as part of their events. We see huge value in our host, James, and probably would never do the event without him, if in all honesty, because it would be a totally different animal, a totally different kettle of fish. But if anybody wants to follow up with you, reach out with you, where's the best place to go?
I am always, when I'm not hosting a conference, which you won't get a response from me because obviously I'm focused on doing the conference. But yeah, I'm always happy. Please, there's no obligation. I love making events a great success, and if I can help anyone, just with a 20-minute call, a Zoom offie, as I've called them, I think I branded that, the Zoom offie. You can reach me at Sam Allen, and everyone knows I spell my name stupidly. I'm the only SAMME, SammyAllen.com. Find me on LinkedIn, tap up Adam for my mobile number. So you'll find me on social at Sam Allen. But yeah, if you just want to say, does this work, Sam? Does that work? I'm really happy, because I'd rather you have happy, successful meetings, because then we just make a bigger, more successful industry, and there's more work for us all. But thank you for listening. Thank you for having me. Hope it was useful.
It was brilliant. Everyone, that's the end of this episode. We'll see you in the next one. Please do check out Sam and connect up with her after the show.